Okay, welcome to the notes on the structure of DNA. Okay, many of you know that the DNA molecule has what's called a double helix shape. That means that it's like a twisted ladder. You do need to know that, so write it down if you don't know it already. Two individuals, Watson and Crick, the two gentlemen on the left, were given the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the shape of the DNA double helix. They used Rosalind Franklin's X-ray technology, X-ray crystallography technique to find that out. She was not given the Nobel Prize. She had passed away before the Nobel was given out. It's not clear if that's why she wasn't given the Nobel or whether it was because she was a woman. Okay, I'll only ask you to write it down one time. What does DNA stand for? Please write this long word, deoxyribonucleic acid. That's where the word DNA comes from. Okay, now DNA is a really intimidating molecule for most students. They look at it, they've heard maybe that we have 3 billion letters in our DNA in all of our trillion cells. That gets kind of intimidating, but what I'm going to show you in the next 1 minute is that DNA is actually an extremely simple molecule despite its complexity. First of all, I want you to write down DNA is composed of repeating units called nucleotides. Each nucleotide has a phosphate, a 5-sided sugar, and a nitrogen base. But right now, that doesn't mean a whole lot to you. So nucleotides, this is what I want you to write down. Nucleotides consist of one nitrogen base, one phosphate molecule, and one deoxyribose sugar. It's a 5-sided sugar. If you look at the drawing of the DNA molecule, it's normally twisted, so they've untwisted it and it's facing you. Notice there's two backbones, one on the left side and one on the right side. They're like the posts of a ladder. And notice how simple they are. There's the purple phosphate and then the sort of peach-colored pentagon. That's the sugar. So down the left side, it goes phosphate sugar, phosphate sugar, phosphate sugar, phosphate sugar, down the left side. Scoot over to the right side and notice that there's a purple phosphate followed by the peach-colored pentagon. So it also, on the right side, goes phosphate sugar, phosphate sugar, phosphate sugar, phosphate sugar. The only part of a DNA molecule that ever changes are the letters in the middle, and there are only 4 letters, A and T, and then C and G. Okay, so again, there are 4 nitrogen bases. Those are the letters that go across. They're the rungs of a ladder, the steps of a ladder. And there are 4 of them, and they're always across from each other. So in your notes, I'd like you to write adenine and then show the double arrow across from thymine. And then guanine, I know that font is a little hard to read, guanine, and then the double arrow cytosine, it's across from cytosine. In parentheses by each one, you could write the first letter that they start with. So next to adenine is A, thymine is T, guanine is G, and cytosine is C. If you just show that, that's good enough. Adenine is always across from thymine, and guanine is always across from cytosine. Those pairs are called complementary base pairs because they fit across the DNA molecule. There's actually 3 little rings that fit across the DNA molecule. Now, if you noticed in the previous diagram, adenine and guanine are bigger than cytosine and thymine. Adenine and guanine have what are called 2 rings. I know that they are hexagons and pentagons, but in science and chemistry they refer to those as rings. So adenine and guanine have 2 rings, and those are called purines. Cytosine and thymine each have 1 ring, and they're called pyrimidines. That's going to be hard to remember, except that there's this really handy little trick. The word pyrimidine has a Y in it. So does the words cytosine and thymine. So you can tell that cytosine and thymine are the pyrimidines because they all have Y's in them, and then the other 2 must be the purines. Okay, now there are many different ways to draw a DNA molecule, and for most of us, trying to draw this shaped molecule is very, very challenging. So scientists put their heads together and figured out that there are easier ways of showing the DNA molecule. On the diagram to the bottom left, they show a real simple basic structure, A across from T, C, G, TA, GC. And then the backbone is that sugar phosphate, the P stands for phosphate, sugar phosphate, sugar phosphate. Well, they realized that, hey, you know what, since the sugar phosphate always repeats, maybe we could all agree to not show the sugar and phosphate. We can all agree that we know it's there, we just won't draw it every time. So that gave them the idea of the drawing on the right, where they just show the A across from the T and the T across from the A. So that you don't even have to show the sugar phosphate backbone because everybody knows it's there. But then they realized there's an even easier way to draw a DNA molecule. They realized that because A is always across from T and C is always across from G, We don't have to show the second side. Just like we know there's the sugar phosphate backbone, we also know that the opposite side, the second strand, is always the opposite letters. So for this first example, where it has an A, you'd put a T. Where there's a T, you'd have an A. T, T, C, A, G. Simple. That's it.